I'd like to spend the next hour doing is exploring something called receptive listening practice, which is an approach to listening that I've been thinking about and exploring and practicing myself for quite a few years. And it really combines having worked on frontline crisis services for decades, in my 20s, 30s, and 40s, with my psychotherapy training and mindfulness practice. So hence receptive listening practice. And I'd like the session to be a mixture of experiential and a little bit of context. So I'm going to invite us to start with a kind of direct experience of just landing a little bit more. Then I'm going to invite you into breakout rooms to have a practice of something. And then I'm going to offer a little bit of kind of context and thinking behind what I'm speaking about. Everything's an invitation. So really don't feel, just really listen to yourselves. You know, this, for me, what's really foundational in all listening work is that we're really listening to ourselves as well as each other. So just really check in when I invite you into certain things and just see what feels right for you, possible for you. Yeah. And there'll be time for conversation and questions as well throughout the session. Okay. So I would like to invite us all just to notice kind of how present we are and how landed we are. So for just a moment, maybe just take your eyes off the screen and just notice your immediate environment. Just kind of come back to yourselves a little bit more and notice the space that you're in. Notice the familiarity, if it is a familiar space, or the newness, if you're somewhere new. And as you're glancing around, see what it's like to soften your gaze, or what it's like to be invited to soften your gaze, so that you're receiving your experience rather than going out of yourself to meet it. Seeing if there's any changes that come through that, through just simply softening your attention visually. Do you notice anything shift just in your own direct experience? And then as you're sitting there kind of receiving your own experience and listening to me, is it apparent, are there any habits around your listening that are kind of here in this moment? Is there any striving or straining? Do you notice that your energy kind of rises up to your upper body? Might be nothing, but something might be really apparent just right here, right now. What's it like in this moment to listen? And as you reflect on that, is it possible to still receive support from the chair that you're sitting on, or whatever it is you are sitting on? Can you feel that beneath you at the same time? Can you feel your feet on the floor at the same time? So we're just exploring listening from present moment awareness, combination of really receiving our direct experience and attending to what's being said and what we're sensing. So Andy, we're going to go into breakout rooms in a moment. So pairs ideally, but we might need a 3. And I'm going to put the instructions in the chat so they'll go with you into the breakout rooms. I want you to just have a few minutes each to share your experience of listening, of let me just double check my exact question. Yeah, like how do you, this was kind of, this session was set up for really for people at work, in meetings or with clients. And it's a kind of really interesting area to explore our listening practice because there's different pressures. So just take turns to share what you know about yourself when you're listening to people in a work setting, like in a meeting or in a one-to-one, and what works for you about the way you listen and what gets in the way for you. And in pairs, you'll have 7 minutes each, and in threes, you'll have 5 minutes each. And then the person who's listening, what I'd like you to invite you to do is simply listen. So not get busy with kind of conversing, but just really rest back into your listening and just notice one thing about the person who's speaking that looks like a resource that they have. Maybe their passion for their work or their dedication or their curiosity. So just really looking for something that feels like a resource in that person. So just listening and noticing if you notice a resource.
Yeah, I love, I think a little bit just saying what Andy said, it's more of a body thing than a head thing. You know, it feels like more of a feeling thing, like a spatial body thing. Yeah.
It really includes that.
Yeah.
Thanks, Nikki. Karen?
Yeah, I just wanted to check. Did you want to speak, Lorraine? Because you've got your microphone off. You've got your microphone on.
It's okay. Thanks, Karen.
You sure? I wasn't sure if you were waiting to come in there, Lorraine. That was just such a good question. The questions just really, both of us sort of really appreciated the simplicity of the question and just what unfolded. The awarenesses that are kind of like just waiting in the wings behind the curtain, ready to come in. They want to be seen, these parts that are in the experience of listening, and more. It was just such a rich process. Yeah.
Wonderful. Thanks. Okay. I'm going to share my screen and talk for maybe 5 minutes. I won't be able to see you whilst I talk, I don't think. So if you've got questions, if you could hold until we've just gone through some slides, and then we'll have some space to explore anything that it touches on. So, okay. Oh yeah, I can see you a little bit. Okay, so can you all see my screen? Fine, you can see the slideshow, yeah. So let's move. Okay, so what is receptive listening practice? For me, what it is, it's a counterpart to what some of you have referenced, the active listening skills. And the active listening skills are really important, and they're the way that we demonstrate that we're listening. They kind of show that we're listening. They're things like reflecting about what we've heard, paraphrasing a conversation at a meeting, non-verbal, you know, nodding, eye contact. So they really demonstrate to the person that we're listening to, or the people that we're present and we're listening. Receptive practice is the ground that we listen from. So it's a quality of listening that feels spacious, attentive, and present. And it draws from mindfulness and Hakomi therapy, which is a mindfulness-based somatic psychotherapy. Like Nikki said, it's something that's felt by the other rather than seen, although it does exist in our biology. So I'll say a bit more about that in a moment. It's not therapy, but it is very therapeutic because it's both an invitation into present moment experience and connection. And also it's a style of listening that invites the nervous systems of both the listener and the speaker to stay in what's called the window of tolerance. And again, I'm going to say a bit more about that. So that's what I mean by it being therapeutic. Brings us into the present and invites our systems to settle. So the window of tolerance is a frame, just a really useful, simple frame for talking about things like nervous system regulation. It's coined by Dan Siegel, who's a neuroscientist. And in the middle, inside our window of tolerance, that's when our nervous system is regulated, where we're both alert and responsive. And our window of tolerance increases or decreases depending on our stress levels. So if our stress levels rise, our window of tolerance can reduce depending on our relationship to stress. If we start to get what's called hyper aroused, we go into the fight flight mechanisms, the stress response. So we leave our window of tolerance and we start to feel our nervous system goes into what's called hyper arousal. We start to want to kind of fight back or leave the situation, like leave the conversation or argue in the conversation. The other way we can leave our window tolerance is we can go into freeze or shut down, which is known as hyperarousal. So where we just disappear. I'm going to say a bit more about how they show up in listening in the next slide. But it's the reason I'm bringing this in is because it's just a very simple reference point to kind of hold. Am I in my window of tolerance? Are the people or person that I'm speaking to, are they in theirs? And if not, what needs to happen to bring us back into window tolerance, a more regulated state? So in terms of listening, looking at the window tolerance through the lens of listening, again, starting in the middle, in the window of tolerance when we're listening, our nervous system's regulated. So we're going to feel that mixture of relaxed and alert. Our listening will be patient, presence and fluid. We'll be able to go with increased kind of energy. If suddenly lots of people are talking or one person's energy is rising, we can meet that, or we can really go slow and really attune to very slow or stuck communication. We're able to process our thoughts and feelings whilst in connection with another. We can connect to the present moment and we can attune to the other person. So we're aware of them, we can sense them and feel to some degree where they're at, what they're feeling. And our boundaries are really healthy. So they're clear, but we're able to sense through them. So they're not really closed, like really strong and shut, but they're not overly porous. They're that middle ground of clear and sensing. When we've gone into hyperarousal, fight or flight in our listening, we're going to tend towards more impatience. We're going to want to interrupt, finish people's sentences, or rescue people from what they're saying or what they're experiencing. We're going to experience ourselves as really busy or distracted with a mind racing or overly planning what we're going to say next. We might be controlling in our communication. We might be really attached to a fixed agenda and try and steer people there. And our boundaries are going to be quite rigid, quite fixed. If we've gone into hypoarousal, if we've left our window by that mechanism, we've gone into more of a freeze or shutdown state. And that's where we're not going to be able to be that focused or present in the conversation. We might not be able to follow it. There's going to be a feeling of a lack of connection to ourselves and others. We might feel resistant and not wanting to engage in what the person's sharing. And that's different to having a time pressure. You know, obviously when there's a time pressure at work and somebody says something that's big, we might have to contain that. We might not have the time to respond fully. But in that moment, there'd probably be a way to acknowledge what's been heard and contain it, rather than a kind of pushing away of, I haven't got space for that, I can't bear to be with that. That's the difference of being resistant or managing time pressure. And the boundaries in hyperarousal are going to be more amorphous. There's going to be less distinction of where I end and you begin, what's mine, what's yours, in a kind of overwhelming place, overwhelming kind of feeling. Like, again, that's different to kind of feeling connected and feeling some sense of a shared reality Amorphous is kind of overwhelming, where I'm getting filled up because I just haven't got my edges and it's too much. So practicing receptive listening, it's a way of being rather than an idea. So with active listening, they're really kind of tangible and concrete, and you can name them. Receptive listening is approached experientially by doing things like regularly pausing, noticing, receiving or allowing what's here, and then settling back into direct moment-to-moment experience. And this practice builds our capacity to offer attuned, alert, and spacious attention. So some practical steps to practice this could include orienting, which is what we started off by doing, just orienting to your immediate environment, to the space that you're sitting in. And then we softened our attention. So that lessens the tendency of striving and straining, which can pull us into more kind of hyper aroused. Using our sensory awareness, again, that'll return us to the present. What you just did, looking for what you appreciate in the other, or looking for what you notice that's resourceful in the other, that can really interrupt our agenda to change or to fix another person. And then kind of resting back and resourcing ourselves from the wider environment, that brings our attention outwards, widens it, brings perspective. And in moments where we're getting really caught in communication or feeling very pressured, just resting back and opening up can settle our system. And what we're doing in this is that it is nervous system communicating to nervous system. So there's a body of work now called interpersonal biology, which is also Dan Siegel, who did the window of tolerance. And science is now showing how much our systems are just communicating with each other and adapting all of the time. There's something called limbic resonance in our brain, where we're just sensing and adapting, and we're looking to connect. But we're also, if our nervous systems are defending, then we're also looking to kind of, are we at risk, to keep ourselves safe. So it really is moment by moment checking. The more regulated our nervous system is, the more our system can invite those that we're listening to into a regulated nervous system themselves. And that's a process called co-regulation that happens with two people or in groups. So I'm seeing receptive listening practice as something that's really simple, but something that does need practice. You know, often things that are simple aren't necessarily easy. They take time, and it can take time to absorb, because it's quite counterculture, especially in the world of work, where there is time pressure, and we're looking at, you know, having to meet outcomes and deadlines and all those kind of things that do increase busyness and speed. And also, when we turn towards receptive listening, we come face to face with our own stress patterns that have been held in our physiology. They've been there for good reason, and they might be our default. They often are our default. We don't even know, because they're so familiar to us. So starting to get underneath those and rewire those, that does take commitment, time, and patience. And active listening skills are really, really important. I don't in any way mean to undermine them. I'm not saying this is instead of, it really is a counterpart. But why it's important to me to have the receptive ground is that I know from experience that it's really possible to kind of look like you're listening and do all the right things and make all the right signs and noises, but underneath there's all sorts of stuff going on that isn't being communicated. And that ground is equally, if not more important. And there's a link there to my work and Dan Siegel's work for further info. So I'm going to close this down and stop sharing. And yeah, maybe just kind of notice what your body needs to do, because that was quite a lot of information. And just notice if your body needs to stretch, look away from the screen, whatever, move. just as a moment to kind of integrate and allow that to settle. And then there's a bit of time for questions, and I'm really happy to stay on for a few minutes afterwards if anybody wants to explore anything in more depth than we've got time for today, but we've got 10 minutes. So any kind of thoughts, questions? Andy?
Just to say, for me, that has been extremely timely. It felt like exactly what I needed right now. So thank you, first of all. And I guess the other thing is, I've just joined a dot in my head in those last few things that you were saying, where one of the sort of active listening approaches I've been aware of and used in the past is, I know it is Egan skills, but it's a sort of 3-stage listening process. And one of the things that I feel I've learned about using that approach is that it's entirely possible to do the 3 stages perfectly, but you've entered the 3 stages with an agenda or you know, a sort of a desire to get towards a particular outcome or whatever. And what I've learned about that is that if you enter with any of those things, you can do them perfectly and the whole thing is still a complete mess. So the connection I was just making there was that I think some of what you were sharing for me was almost kind of, where are you listening from? Is it kind of settled and clean in my language, or is it arriving with a, you know, a direction and an energy already attached to it? So what you've said really sort of makes an awful lot of sense for me, and I think it will be a useful conscience to my own listening practice, if you like. So thank you.
Fantastic, that's great, thanks. Nikki, and then Karen. Yeah,
I really enjoyed hearing how Dan Siegel is doing this interpersonal biology and bringing this. I did a workshop, a course years ago on Barbara Ann Brennan healing, and it was showing you pictures of how energy streams between people, and you know, and it could be seen as a little bit woo woo, but now it's, you know, science is proving, you know, that this really does happen, you know, and it's comforting to know that it's becoming more mainstream, because it's something I've always felt in my body, but now to have things backed up, you know, this is what's happening between people. It's
really affirming.
Really affirming, and his work sounds amazing. It's really good to see it, you know.
Yeah, I agree. Thanks, Nikki. Karen, did you have your hand up?
Yeah, kind of half. I'm not sure if I'm resonating with what you said, Andy. Something, maybe a continuation of that. I really like how you've pulled the thought of listening, or the assumptions about listening apart, and kind of clarified this, what can be happening on a nervous system level, even if I haven't got any conscious agenda. If my nervous system's activated, it's like a part of it is trying to get somewhere away, trying to get ahead, or trying to get away, or trying to hide or resist something. You know, the biology's already got that chemical or electrical process operating underneath any other parts of me. And I kind of, like, on one level I've got that somewhere on one level, and at the same time, hearing how you've pulled them apart, it's like I can't get that enough. There's so much more in those dynamics and dances within us in any moment that I can't hear that enough. I can't hear it in so many ways enough, all the different ways enough.
Yeah.
Actually, kind of unmerge experiences, things that have got stuck together in me away. And let there be space around it all.
Yeah. Thank you. I think that's why it's important for me to call this a practice, because we're trying to move beyond something that is so deeply entrenched in terms of pressure and speed and power over, and either ourselves or another. And it's so not going to be an overnight shift like so much that's being spoken about. So I just want to normalize that, really, because I feel very similar. You know, I catch myself getting ahead again and again and again, and it's not like I don't do that, but it's just noticing it much more. And I find the present moment, you know, we can just choose again and again in each moment, and I find that really forgiving, that approach, because it's just now, what's happening in this moment, that's, you know, that's what matters. So yeah, I think I really agree with what you're saying, that it's so much of this is so unconscious, collectively and individually, so, and culturally. Yeah. Thank you. Lorraine.
Yeah, I find it very helpful. Yeah, just almost like echoing what others have said. I liked Karen's phrase, like unpicking, you know, just this sense that we have, you know, this sense of hearing, but just like really unpicking that apart. And I'm really glad you have, you know, wrote, you know, your slides were good, and I'm glad that they're going to be available to you know, to read over again. And as you were talking, I was just like imagining different scenarios of at work, you know, being in the kitchen at work, and you know, in groups, like and just it's very, very helpful. Yeah, it's kind of loose. It feels like a loosening up and of, yeah, like entrenched habits almost, and unconscious. So yeah, it's good. Thanks, Jenny.
Yeah, it's a pleasure, Lorraine. Thank you. Yeah, I'm excited to hear your excitement about putting it into practice a little bit more. Andy.
This is not a loaded question at all, but I often think it's quite interesting when hearing someone like yourself that's got a depth of experience and expertise to ask, is there a shadow side that you're aware of, or what doubts sometimes maybe creep in for you around this practice, if any? So what?
Yeah, there's a really clear shadow, I think, on this kind of approach, which is you can look spacious and look slow, and actually it's kind of masked, shut down, you know. So that hypoarousal, which is the freeze, you know, the more I kind of understand the nervous system work, the more I see that there's lots of things like meditation or spacious facilitation that actually aren't that. They are people that are shut down and disconnected. So yeah, I'd say that's one of the shadows that I know. It's a potential hiding place, which is why the window tolerance piece is so important, because it's not about being calm. The window tolerance isn't about being calm, it's about being alert and spacious and responsive. So you can be having a heated debate and be in your window tolerance, or you could be firefighting literally in a building in your window of tolerance. It's like if your nervous system is that resourced. But yeah, that's the shadow that I've come across so far. There probably will be more. Yeah, thank you for the question.
Yeah, great.
Karen.
Yeah, if we've got time, sorry, it's like it's something about that. My personal experience has been to try and discern between what is merge and what is attunement.
Lovely.
That's my work, really, personally. That's like been a big thing.
So that's the boundaries piece. Yeah. So the difference between amorphous and healthy boundaries. Yeah, great. Yeah.
Karen, would you mind saying a wee bit more about that? Was it merge and attunement? Were they the words you used?
Yes. So my personal. I'll try and be concise. Thanks for the question. Is where I've aligned or colluded or abandoned myself and got lost in someone else's experience that looks like deep empathy, kind of an empath, kind of, that's the term that's put on it these days. But really, I've not had any ground of my own. I've done that as a way to find belonging and connection and an identity or a sense of self or a identity as a therapist. But really, it's been some kind of merge, and I have not been able to hold a strong container. It looks like holding a strong container, but it's not the same as being walking alongside. It's not the same. That's still working on it, not still finding places where that happens, and I'm not quite aware.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. So I really want to honour the time boundary, and I will hang out for another few minutes if anyone's got any more questions, but just to give people permission to leave as we've come to the hour. And just as a closure, just to kind of go back to where we started really, and just coming back into your own space and noticing your immediate environment whilst we've still got the connection on the screens, just coming back to yourselves a little bit more. Noticing the support of the seat beneath you, something familiar in your immediate space. Just noticing how you are in this moment. What's the feedback in your experience? And yeah, really thank you ever so much for coming. It's been really lovely to share this. I really appreciate your time and your attention and your interest.